Good evening, Neil Thompson. I'm the president of the Canada Beaverbrook Community Association, and I'd like to welcome you to this recording of the Canada Beaverbrook Community Association Annual General Meeting held on April the 19th, 2022. This introduction is recorded after the rest of this recording, as yours truly was a little clumsy and paused the recording shortly after the beginning. So we missed a few minutes of the first presentation from the Western Ottawa Community Resource Center. The rest is intact, and I hope you enjoy. Our agenda for this evening is quite simply to start with community updates from the Western Ottawa Community Resource Center, the Ottawa Public Library, our councillor, Kathy Curry, on the state of things in Canada North, and Barbara Ramsey, who is the chair of the Canada Green Space Protection Coalition, on the state of the world in terms of ClubLink and the application by ClubLink to redevelop the Canada Golf Course. That will be followed by the President's report from myself on activities in the Kbca in the past year and our plans for coming years. The Treasurer's report in terms of our financial position. Community Center report in terms of the Community Center, which the Kbca manages on behalf of the city with a grant, and how the activity there has actually been pretty good for us. The follow-up to that will be presented by Rob Mccauley and his wife Diane Tessier, who are going to talk about the green and sustainability projects, particularly the tree inventory program, what happened in 2021 and our plans for 2022. In addition, we did a community survey in March of 2022, for which we had some very good results and very good response from the community. We'll review those and what information was revealed and our steps after that. In addition, we will present the proposed slate of board and officers and then adjourn. So with no further ado, I will pass you on. The next presentation is with the Western Ottawa Community Resource Center, which is presented by Colleen Taylor and Adele Bisson, who are both family resource workers with the Western Ottawa Community Resource Center. Thank you.
Okay. We have had periods of time throughout the pandemic that we have been able to be in person, and we're currently in person. But when we weren't, we had the space, but we continued to pay for the space, even though we weren't running the space out of Beaverbrook. We also have a toy lending resource bus that comes to Beaverbrook every month, sometimes even twice a month. And basically it's a resource where parents can, like a library, take out toys to use for a 3-week period. It's a great opportunity for parents. They love it. They can test out toys and they don't have to pay to buy toys as the children develop. We also have something called Outdoor Adventures, where we could run those because they weren't indoors. So we would basically have a guided tour with children and their families in the various locations in Beaverbrook. We also ran a program called Stroller Walk for young babies and their moms, or children that weren't walking, that moms could either push them in a stroller or baby wear, and go on like power walks and get to know their colleagues and friends and make new friends. I mean, I personally used these programs many years ago when my son was young. These are a lifesaver for our mental health as well as the children's parents. We also do workshops virtually. We were doing workshops throughout the pandemic on different themes like power struggles with your children and school readiness. We recently did an in-person program called Messy Play with Dad, which was a huge success. All of our play groups currently are full and they have waiting lists. So they're very popular and people are anxious to get back to these programs in full force. What else can I say? We run programs not only in Beaverbrook, but in Canada, Constance Bay, Fitzroy Harbor, yeah, a whole bunch of other places I'm getting little flustered. Let me just see if I'm forgetting anything. We also in the past have rented out the meeting rooms at Beaverbrook to do some of the workshops that I've mentioned. We have a family fun day coming up in June. Again, that's going to be in the Glencairn area, but it's all this catchment area. Everybody is invited to come to these programs. Recently, we had a very successful baby conference. It was a 3-day conference of different of workshops for parents for ideas of like infant massage. We did story time and how to sing to your child. Those are just a couple of the programs that we did. Now, Colleen, is there anything that I might be missing that you could add to this?
Just our family navigator, Dominique.
Yes.
Yeah, so she's just within our program. So she's there to help parents sort of navigate some of the systems that their children and the family might be involved in, or just if they're struggling in their parenting role. Dominique is somebody that can meet in person with them, or it can be through a Zoom call, or even just telephone contact as well. So a lot of, so Adele spoke to you about our early on services, and I'm just going to talk about all of the other services that are available at the center. Because of course, although our mandate is the 0 to 6-year-old population, they come with other members of the family, and there's often a lot of intergenerational families as well. So the center itself provides services sort of prenatally to seniors and people with disabilities. And pretty much all of our services are free without charge. Excuse me, there are a few that do have some service fees attached to them. But if you're ever in doubt and you're wanting to refer somebody to the centers, of course, look at the website. A lot of things are detailed there. But if you're just really not sure and you want to kind of do it quickly, as I always say, just call into the center. The receptionist can often answer just some general inquiries, or she'll put you on to whoever can answer that question more directly. So one of the services that we get a lot of calls for is through our counseling services team. So right now, when I checked in today, the child and youth counselor is sort of experiencing sort of the heaviest workload, if you will, and that appointments now are being taken into June. So you can just imagine with the pandemic that there's been a lot of difficulties that the children and youth have been experiencing. They're also, counseling services is also providing a lot of telephone access, and in the last little while, as we said, have been offering in-person support. So there is crisis intervention support, crisis counseling. There can be telephone check-ins for people, and our community support services for seniors and people with disabilities also has that telephone support service, as well as friendly visiting. Counseling services can help with food and food security and supplies and delivery for medically necessary transportation. There could be coordination with that, as well as through our community support program, and a lot of virtual programming and support as well. We also have our women and children's shelter called Chrysalis House. They also have a 24-hour crisis line. So again, if you're ever talking with somebody, or for yourself, and you're just not sure about, is this really someplace that I should be thinking about going with my situation, is you can just call in and have your questions answered, and they can help direct you to the right resource. We also have our adult day program. It runs out of our main site at McNeil, and we also have one at Algonquin College. So that's for people with Alzheimer's and dementias. And we also have, as I was saying, our community support program. So they have transportation, Meals on Wheels, And new to Meals on Wheels is also access to Indian food, and that's quite new in the last little while, and it's going very well. We have foot care services that have just started up again. There is a fee for that service, and obviously, like, appointments are needed for a lot of the different services. They have a weekly caregiver support program that presently is being done through Zoom. Information and referral friendly visiting, as I had said before, and also through our counseling services, for our children and youth services, we've just started up with some of those in person again. So our zone, we call the zone for the youth, it's opened in the last little while for in-person activities. That's for the 12 to 18-year-olds. And the children's services are for the 7 to 12-year-olds. So one of the new programs that have started, it's in Constance Bay presently, is Coping Capsule. It's a program to help support children with anxiety and struggling with big emotions and that sort of thing. And we also have a community developer that can come out and support different organizations and agencies throughout our catchment area, and help to guide you with any initiatives that you're starting up in the community. So I think hopefully I got all of that, and we have some seconded agencies within the center. Again, but I don't want to monopolize obviously this whole time, but to really see what is included in all of our services and where all of our early on programs are, is to check our website, which is wocrc.ca. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for inviting us in.
Oh, thanks for that. It's always something that people don't realize exactly all the services you guys do, and they're right down the street. So it's
Yes.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
All right. So the next presenter, Abby Clark from our local Beaverbrook Library branch.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Abby Clark. I am your local librarian from the Beaverbrook branch of the Ottawa Public Library. Now, I do have a few slides, and I'm just going to share my screen here for a second, so bear with me. All right. Hopefully everybody can see. Oh, my goodness, all of my things up on my screen here. All right. Sorry. Joys of technology. Okay, we're just going to stay here where I know it's safe. So hi, everyone. I am from the Beaverbrook branch, 2500 Campo. We are really close in the community. We love, interacting with our community and being able to see all your faces again after, however many years apart. So we're happy to welcome you back with all of the services that you know and you love after almost, a couple of years of closing and reopening and stopping services and starting services again. In addition to our large collection, things like books, magazines, newspapers, DVDs, and our technology that's in our branches like public PCs and our Chromebooks, we're happy to announce that we have reopened our study spaces and bookable programming rooms for community events, which is a big deal for students and for people trying to get back into community events. We are also happy to reintroduce our in-person programs. So things like book clubs, and we have our robotics team that's gotten back. We have Canada has its own robotics team, if you didn't know, that literally make robots in the library. It's awesome. We have our one-of-a-kind digitization lab where you can preserve family memories free of charge in the library. You can digitize things like photographs and slides, negatives, Super 8 reels, VHS tapes, and we're looking on hopefully maybe expanding that one day. So we have our own personal lab for the community. In case you missed it, big news from the library, we have no more overdue fees. So that's something that we introduced a couple months back as a whole, not just Beaverbrook, but every single one of our 33 branches. It's something that we call the materials recovery model. So we've done away with overdue fees. We're hopefully trying to make the library a more equitable, welcoming space for all, and sort of giving people fees for maybe being late, especially in the wake of COVID with how busy people were and how stressful things were, didn't really make sense anymore. So we have done away with those. So it's a whole new library. In other exciting news, we are hiring. Just want to put that out there. We have 2 available positions, one at this branch, at Beaverbrook branch. It's awesome. I know I'm biased, but it is a great branch. And one at Centennial. No experience required. So if you want to submit a resume, if you want to see our posting, maybe pass it off to someone that you know, it is available on ottawa.ca just for a few more days till April 25th. And then we're closing it up. So like I said, it's great to see everybody's faces again. We're always looking to connect and reconnect with the people that we unfortunately didn't have too much contact with during the pandemic. So on this first slide here, you see my email. If anybody would like to get in contact, there's a couple people that we've been starting to reintroduce ourselves to and make sure that we're still in connection with, and there will be many more in coming months. But if there's any community partners out there that need support, that want anything, that want to collaborate, that need absolutely anything from your local library, you have my contact email on screen. Or if you just have some general questions, if you're just a member of the public that just wants to know something, I'm around. Feel free to send an email. And that's it. I will pass it back to Neil. And you might be muted, Neil.
The dreaded mute. Someone's going to make $1 billion who invents a button you can click, not focused on anywhere on your screen, and it pops the mute back and turns it off. Anyway, so I'd like to ask Kathy Curry to say a few words from Canada North's perspective, and particularly around Beaverbrook.
Thank you very much, Neil. First thing I want to do is really thank you. Neil, Neil and I would go way back to school council days. But when I was appointed here in November, I think the very first person who may have contacted me was Neil, I believe, and invited me to the Beaverbrook Community Association meetings. And we've not stopped since. It's been very busy in Canada North, as you know. And I really appreciate how much help, certainly Neil, as your president here, has offered to me. And following right behind, if not equal, is former Councillor Marianne Wilkinson, who's on this call, and MP Jenna Suds, who's on this call as well. Super helpful to me to know what I should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And then right after that is Barbara Ramsey, who, without Barbara's 3-hour update on the golf course, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I know Barbara has lots more to say on that, so I won't say too much. But I didn't realize this AGM was a who's who of Canada. But I would just really want to thank everyone on this call for all the help. You know who you are. Lee, meeting you at Western Ottawa, again, from our past lives as well. This has been really a huge help to me to get up and running. As you know, there's tons going on. The golf course, Barbara will talk about, and I can answer questions as well afterwards. We've just sent a letter to Marilee and PP Fullerton on how she can help us. But I did want to say that the pathways in Beaverbrook, to be specific to Beaverbrook, are going ahead. They're in bad shape. And I know that MP Suds started that project, so I don't take any credit for this, but they will be going ahead. The lighting, your lights, your square lights, Neil and I and Canada North staff had a meeting the other day that they the ones that there's one that's missing will be replaced by one that's in Katimavik. And we'll be looking to get them all up and functioning as we can. There will be further, ones that run out of electricity, have problems with the electricity, and they will be replaced by signs that are fluorescent. But we're working with your city staff on the possibility of making sure that we can keep them all up and running on an ongoing basis, because they add a lot of character to Beaverbrook, and people tend to love them. And so we're on it, and we're in support of keeping it as the community is, keeping them going. 100 Weeping Willow, Neil and Marianne and members of the community have worked very hard to get a newer version of where that building will go that may be more suitable. We haven't had comments back yet from staff, so it's ongoing, but I think there's a better plan than there was originally with the building right along the road. So hopefully there will be more agreement, and probably another meeting. I would stay tuned for that. The Taran Road apartment building, again, due to Neil and the Bethune Condo Corporation residents, meetings to make that better than it was. As Marianne told me many times, you know, you have a meeting with the community works to get a better plan, and everyone ends up being more pleased with the end result. So that is exactly what has happened. I will tell you that the traffic around Wedge, Stephen Leacock, All Saints continues to be a problem with parents parking, but we've had bylaw out there, we've had police out there. Our community police officer, Jeff Kostuch, who is your new police officer, has been very helpful in getting more tickets given. I'm getting emails in the counselor's office, people not happy they're getting ticketed. However, they are parked illegally and doing illegal things. So, you know, what am I supposed to do with that? We work with the principals. We get the principals to send out messages warning parents, but there has been improvement. And I have gone out and looked at the issues. I understand the problems are ongoing, but we are trying hard to stop that. The sidewalks on Varley have been an issue. I believe we'll be having another community meeting on that because there's still concern. I know that individual residents have been contacted and have helped to design pouching out of the road and other changes to make sure that trees aren't damaged. However, there's still some concern, so we're still working on working with individual homeowners for the sidewalk. So I'm happy to take further questions on that. The gateway signage was one of the last things I have, and I'm not happy to answer any questions on anything. But gateway signage is coming. The province has paid for gateway signage to every neighborhood, Beaverbrook being one of them, that will say that the entire neighborhood will be 40 kilometers an hour. So those signs that are throughout the community will be coming down, and gateway signs will be replacing to let everyone know that the entire community is 40 kilometers. So there isn't confusion. Obviously, I have a lot more to say on the golf course, but I will wait for Barbara, and then at the end we have more to say for sure. But we would encourage you all to write emails to your MPP Fullerton on our latest situation, and we can talk about that more later on. But anyways, thank you all very much for coming here, and thank you for inviting me, Neil.
Thank you. Informative as usual, and I'm sure this is your 14th meeting today. All right, Barbara, if you could provide us an update on where we are with the golf course for Beaverbrook residents.
For sure, Neil. Thanks again for inviting me. I was going to say across the pond, but the pond's not there yet. It only goes in if Clublink wins. Right now, it's just across the park. So good to be with you folks. And thank you, Councillor Curry, for that introduction. We've spent a lot of time the past many weeks on this file, so we've got lots going on, and so I'll just give you a quick overview. Reminder, the best place to go for information any day, every day, is ourcanadagreenspace.ca. We work hard to keep the website current, and there's lots on there right now. The legal update, major issue, the high-level issue, the Supreme Court appeal by the city is in process. So everything's been filed. There are no more other opportunities for documents to be filed, whether that be by the city or by Clublink. And we're waiting for a decision as to whether the city is going to be granted leave to appeal. And they're seeking leave to appeal the striking down of 2 clauses by the Ontario Court of Appeal last year. And those 2 clauses are about the golf course land reverting to the city if Clublink fails to operate it as a golf course. It does not strike down the 40% agreement, and we have to keep saying that because there are people who believe erroneously that the entire agreement was struck down, and that's not the case. So the city is actively pursuing that. And we've been able to partner with them along the way. And that is the uppermost legal activity. And it will define what happens next. If the city is successful, then we're all in a waiting mode. The hearing probably would not be scheduled until 2023, based on what we understand the Supreme Court's calendar to be. If the city is not successful, and there's a very good chance it might not be successful, simply because the Supreme Court hears less than 10% of the cases being put to it. So it has to be a matter that the court deems is either of national importance or public importance. And it is fair to say, I think, that the arguments being made by the city, and certainly the lawyers and those that spend their time on contract law, et cetera, are truly of the mind that the error made at the Court of Appeal, which was confounded by a lot of different legal decisions that lacked clarity themselves because they were made at different levels of the courts, including the Supreme Court. There's lots of reason for the confusion. So the general view is the city has a very good chance here, because there are a lot of folks that would want to clear this situation up. And I can give you a very good reason why right here in Ottawa, we already have a Me Too lawsuit tagging on the back of Club Link, and that is at the Cedar Hill Golf Club up on Cedar Hill, off of Cedar Hill Drive. So just in a nutshell, that also was a golf club that was developed in the 80s in the city of Nepean as opposed to the city of Canada, and a subdivision agreement was struck there. There was not a 40% agreement, but the subdivision agreement was struck and also contained rules about land protection and access in perpetuity. And that developer has lawyered up and is now pursuing the city on that matter, because it would appear that the city has already said, no, we're not in agreement with that subdivision. So all that to say, it speaks to why the matter should be in front of the Supreme Court. And we understand there are a lot of municipalities elsewhere who are very, very concerned about the ramifications on contracts. And so we'll see where that goes. We're monitoring. We'll let you know when that happens. If the city is unsuccessful, we return to the Court of Justice Labrosse, the Ontario Superior Court, and he will once again hear the city and Club Link on the matter of the 40% agreement. He'll also hear from the Canada Green Space Protection Coalition. Club Link once again was going to oppose our participation, but we have caused them to back down. And to thank them for backing down, we hit them with our own lawsuit. So the coalition is pursuing 2 restrictive covenants that we feel are critical to protect the community and to protect the community's rights. The first is a restrictive covenant. It's actually part of the 40% agreement, and it speaks to the 2 clauses that were severed by the Ontario Court of Appeal. And Club Link is continuing to argue, or wants to continue to argue, I should say, is the better tense, that the removal of those clauses nullifies the entire agreement. And we would argue it does not, and that in essence is a restrictive covenant. And so we will argue that. We'll also argue another restrictive covenant that Club Link signed when it purchased the agreement, the golf course lands, in 1996, which is an agreement not to regrade the property or alter the stormwater management function of the property. And this is a continuation of our efforts at the Ontario Land Tribunal over the winter. As I think many of you know, and certainly there's lots of information on our website, the golf course lands, the 175 acres of permeable land, are integral to the management of stormwater management for Beaverbrook, as well as Canada Lakes. And not only us, but those downstream landowners on the Kbca. So that's the Beaver Pond and then going across the tech park into the NCC lands and all the way out to the Ottawa River. So there are a lot of folks with vested interest in this, and that is very much one of the reasons why we're pursuing this restrictive covenant application. We also, Easter's over. We don't want all our eggs in one basket. So we want to be able to challenge ClubLink on as many levels as we possibly can. And there's another reason for doing that. We are only like the third or fourth golf course that ClubLink has attempted this on. They've got a portfolio of dozens of them. And this is the new pandemic. And we're going to see and hear these challenges to urban green space all over Ontario and Canada. So we must pursue it. We must pursue it for that reason. The OLT, the decision did not go our way. We're not surprised, but highly offended at the quality of the decision and the lack of substantiation for the decision-making that went on in the decision. And unfortunately, we spent $250,000 on behalf of the community participating and fighting that. The city equally so. And the odds are not good to go back there and have it reviewed. Our experts suggest it was a fool's game and it would not be a useful tool and a financial waste of money to boot. So what we are trying to address, however, is the lack of content in that decision and how we improve and how we get information out of there, and also how things are done in Ontario. Quite frankly, we're still struggling with this Glen Abbey decision last year, where the Minister of Housing got involved and granted some kind of a negotiation or opening for ClubLink to walk away from that deal, and Oakville and its residents got Glen Abbey protected. And we're very happy for them. And this is, we feel, the right decision. But there should be some justification as to why that decision is right in Oakville and it's not right in Canada. And if it's not right here, is it going to work in Aurora? Is it going to work in Kingston? Where is it going to or not going to work next? And MPP Fullerton has been a big supporter of the coalitions and of our cause all along, but somehow of late she's taken the position, to our chagrin, that the problem with now that we've had an OLT decision belongs at the city, and it's the city's problem entirely. And the city and the coalition are both of the mind that this is simply unfair. The Planning Act and the Municipal Acts are provincial acts, and they guide the functionality at the city. To suggest that the province has no role in this matter is foolish. We know that because they acted last year for Glen Abbey. So it makes absolutely no sense. And at the very least, you as taxpayers, Canada Lakes taxpayers, are owed an explanation as to how Ontario works. When is a contract not a contract in Ontario? And good to have MP Suds on the call, because maybe she can ask the question on a national scale as well. When is a contract in Ontario not a good contract in Canada? These are very basic questions. I won't go on too much longer, other than to say our big challenge right now, we are writing letters to MPP Fullerton. You can get a template letter on our website if you didn't get our e-news this week, our canadagreenspace.ca. We are continuing to fundraise. We are currently trying to raise our next $250,000, and we are only $88,000 short of that right now. So we've had an incredible spring of fundraising, and we thank our donors for that, if they're with us tonight. And This Thursday, we have a virtual town hall, our second one, and it will be on stormwater. So if you are at all confused, and it's easy to get confused because it's a lot of engineers involved in that. If you would like an explanation, 7 o'clock, check out our website. The link is there, much like your meeting tonight. It'll be virtual. And our stormwater expert, Doug Nuttall, will be providing the educational vehicle for you. Next week, we have a Speak Up for Green Space event in the Canada North Tech Park with our tech partners, and very, very critical issue for them as they try and remain globally competitive with the best and the brightest, and being able to try to attract them. Our green space and our lifestyle here in Canada is essential for them. And last but not least, we've got a golf tournament June 1st. Chip in for green space. We have 14 tickets left, I believe. So if you're a golfer and want to come out, again, it's all on our website, ourcanadagreenspace.ca. Thanks very much, and happy to take questions conjointly with the counselor or whatever. And I also have to say thanks to Neil. He wears a lot of hats, your president, and he's a really active member on our board. And I know we wouldn't be doing as much as we do without Neil. So thank you, Beaverbrook, for loaning him to us from time to time.
Kathy, you said you might have some additional words you wanted to talk on the golf course?
I just wanted to say, Barbara said a lot of everything we needed to say, but, you know, I guess I would say that I'm not sure. I mean, MP Suds is on here, but I would say we absolutely have to go with the main message that Terry Matthews says to me often, and that this fundamentally starts because of a lack of integrity with that 40% agreement. And so if you have a future where agreements don't mean anything, which I believe that's what the developers are saying. We don't care about the agreement. The agreement was there, but whatever. And I just think, how do we go forward as a society if that's what happens? And so hence the quick response by the city to go to the Supreme Court of Canada because of the concept that if all cities have in perpetuity clauses, and any other group in the world has an in perpetuity clause, and it doesn't actually mean what you think it means, then where are we? And I made the point on the radio this morning about, if you think about some of the Indigenous land agreements that we have and what that would mean if we actually don't care what it says historically, I think the Supreme Court should weigh in on this. So I just would say, I really hope, as Barbara is saying, that the Supreme Court does pick this up, because I think it's much bigger than people actually realize. You know, we have green space here. There's green space all over this country that, if it isn't, you know, if there are contracts that aren't to be respected, you know, where are we? So I would say that. The other I would say is that I really hope that MPP Fullerton looks at the letter that the city councillor sent on behalf of the community to say there are 3 things that she could do. Have an environmental assessment, ask Steve Clark to do the same for us, and have a community consultation, because I think those are 3 things she could promise. So I would just encourage you, please write to her and say, there are 3 things you can do. Maybe you're thinking that there is nothing you can do. There are 3 things you can do. And I would suggest you do them. So I just would encourage to send emails to her. And also, Barbara, you know, we hadn't said who else to copy necessarily, but I've been encouraging people to copy all the ministers, like Minister Clark, all the MPPs, Lisa McLeod, Goldie, can't remember her last name, and Steve Clark. Is that the Lisa, Goldie, Steve, and Marilee? And copy the mayor, whoever, you know, and I will be putting a motion forward in the next month to council, and then I'll be looking for your support with that as well. So just stay tuned. But anyway, at the end of this, Neil, if there's questions, I can answer individual questions.
I have not seen anybody else pop up with a question in the queue. So thank you for that. That's excellent. At any time, you can obviously send emails on to Kathy or to Barbara or myself, and we'd be happy to respond on those. All right, so President's report, what's been going on in the KBCA? Basically, COVID has been our main, shall we say, obstacle to getting things done, as it has been for many other people. One of the key things we do is we manage the community center, for which we have a community center manager who works on a part-time basis and a cleaner. We've had actually a very good year. 2020, a lot of it was in complete lockdown, and we had to literally close the community center. It's been open and closed and flipping and flopping throughout 2021, but we were expecting to lose upwards of $24,000 based on our expenses versus revenue, and we actually made $14,000, which will get covered in the treasury. So financially did well. We did quite a few things, including bringing in Hepa class room filters, which have been operating in there since 2020. And people are quite happy with those because they are a very effective cleaner of local area. And we're seeing that pattern being repeated in hotels and other places where, as a quick fix until higher quality ventilation becomes the norm. So the community center is doing quite well. Thank you very much. Our chief frustration with the renovation boom is we're having a hell of a time trying to get a contractor to do the work we've got. We've lined up, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later in the discussion. We have complete design set up. Recently we brought in a wheelchair accessibility expert company to talk us about where's the best bang for the buck in terms of what we can do to upgrade it for accessibility, and not just people in wheelchairs, but anybody who's infirm, people who are, vision impairment and other things. It's a community center we want to make welcome for all, and we actually believe we can do quite a substantial upgrade at a modest fee. And unfortunately, that's the problem. We're not spending $250,000 for that. Tony, if I just put questions to Councillor Curry in a couple of minutes. Eco-sustainability, we had a bunch of projects in the pipe going into 2019, 2020. They got put on hold because of COVID. We're looking to resume those in 2022, and we have some additional projects which Rob Mccauley and Tessa will talk to. One of the key things we looked at is we need to rejuvenate the KBCA in terms of the board members and volunteers, and especially considering, we've had quite a turnover in the last 5 years of people in the community. So we know there's a lot of new families that moved in, and we did some outreach, and again, Rob and Diane are going to talk about that. As per our usual slate of things, we did do the all candidates debate for the 2021 fall election, which was done virtually. We were also approached by the Cafes group, which Barb is also on the board of, talking about 15-minute neighborhoods. And what most people don't know is that Beaverbrook was probably the first area in Ottawa that was designed explicitly for 15-minute communities. It wasn't called that in the day, but every examination. And we actually have a couple of papers we've written here at the KBCA on what our experience has been, what worked and what didn't. So that has been quite productive. We got pulled also into doing our memorial upgrade of the baseball diamond at Roland Michener, in memoriam for a baseball coach who's been involved for many years. That is looking like it's going to go ahead. So that's great news. The usual wrestling match with all the parties to get them to agree for that to go ahead, but we seem to got there. Obviously, the KGP golf course is front and center for Beaverbrook, as well as it is for Canada Lakes and the KGPC. Planning, I won't go over what Kathy has already talked about, which is 1131 100 Stacy, Weeping Willow. One of the things she didn't mention, but it certainly stands out to me in the last 24 months, is the number of multi-story 1 and 2 bedroom apartments that are being built, all focused at the same price range, which is for downsizing seniors who can afford to move into these places, because we're all going to downsize. And I think that's it's interesting in talking across the Federation of Community Associations. There are apparently something like 70,000 of these things ready to roll out. And the question is, well, what people are going to move into them? So, there's some rather questionable things going on in terms of how the city is rolling out the official plan, and in terms of how is that resolving itself in terms of what developments are being proposed. So it would appear that we've got a real glut of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments at the upper income level, but no rentals for families. And certainly not, the one thing I'm hearing is certainly a lot of students. If you've just graduated in your first 3 or 4 years after graduation, some of these places you struggle to even share an apartment at those prices. Now, there's a couple of things that, we've also been heavily involved in the new official plan, which was put in the pipe quite recently for approval, and the transportation master plan, which is just kicking off. Certainly that's been something that has come up in terms of what's the movement going forward in terms of commitment. A couple of disturbing things in the last 90 days. The city had put forward the official plan for approval to Queen's Park, and it was not reviewed by its expiry date. So the new official plan that's been worked on for the last 3 or 4 years is now in limbo. And it's unclear as to what's going to happen next. There was also a Queen's Park push through, I think it's Bill 109, which is the Build More Homes movement in terms of the city being much more put under the direct management of the province in terms of dictating what will go ahead, essentially circumventing community consultation and to some extent the OLT process. That was pushed through in about a week. And again, that's not what I would call great news in terms of looking after the interests of communities and properly looking at planning. We'll be putting forward some stuff, some input to Kathy Curry, and it's not clear that, in my mind anyway, massive increasing of residential housing when there's many different aspects to a community that are not being upgraded at the same time does not sound like a great win for the future. A part of that discussion is also there was a process or a program that kicked off to look at the future for the Canada North Tech Park and what's called the CPT, or the community planning process, which is a variation on the official plan or how things get approved. And that kicked off, and it's been derailed a little bit, but it is something that we've been talking with other community associations, and that's a topic I'm going to talk to you briefly, is looking at what is the future for the whole of Canada North and West Ottawa. And that's looking at it from both the tech park perspective and the communities in which the tech park is counting on for their top talent to live and play. We found a lot of similar understandings and expectations and aspirations from the tech park community, which is why we're reaching out and meeting with the tech park executives next week and working with them to look at getting engaged with the city. We've had some discussions through Kathy Curry with the manager for economic development and planning, which is Steve Willis, who's a very smart gentleman. And we're hoping that will kick off in the not too distant future. Speaking to the lighting, as Kathy Curry mentioned, we had some issues with some corner street signs disappearing, which are part of our heritage. That has been resolved, thankfully. What most people don't know is there's still a study on the books that has been planned now for, almost 10 years to look at Beaverbrook as potentially a heritage community. In other words, the design and style of, the green space proportionality, the pathways, the heavy green space, the cluster concept is to look at, is there some heritage protection we can do around this and, get some funding to preserve the characteristics of the thing, just like, the pathways are a key part of that. The city is starting to move forward, but hopefully that had been handled many years ago. And there's other aspects we're looking to preserve as well. The one thing that Kathy has certainly brought to the table is meeting regularly with all the community associations. And we meet on a monthly basis, and we're getting a lot of cooperation, and we're looking at a lot of joint projects. As Rob Mccauley will talk about, we're looking at an eco study project, which will be working with EcoCity, which is one of the environmental groups here, and some university students in looking at the South March Highlands and to get information. So there's a lot of stuff, good stuff that's coming out of that. And in terms of, God forbid, we should actually talk to each other amongst the community associations. All right, I'll pause here before moving on to the treasurer's report, just to do a little piece of paperwork before is to talk about a little bit about the community re-engagement. Obviously, we haven't had any community events. We'd like to look at potentially kicking off as soon as we can and the weather gets improved is outdoor activities, and particularly a street or cluster street barbecue. There's been some discussions about what are we going to do for Canada Day. We're looking to identify people who've got ideas, and kick that around in person or virtually. We're also looking to recruit some key positions which have been vacant for some time, including a treasurer, secretary, communications director, and just general directors at large. Now, one of the things we will be doing, came up, is we've actually got some very experienced people, of which Mary Ann Wilkinson is our chief expert on the local community, is to perhaps mentor people who are interested in getting more involved, but need some guidance as to how to move forward. All right, Tony, you had some questions.
Thanks, Neil. First, thanks everyone that's been on this call that have given us a lot of updates on a lot of things that are obviously very important to the community that need to be taken care of. I have two questions for Kathy specifically, and I'll ask the first one and then she can answer, and then I'll raise the second one. So the first one has to do with the condition of the roads in Canada. You spend more time trying to avoid a pothole, and when you do, then you run into the manhole cover that's either too high or too low. I know just 3 to 4 houses from me, each house is developing a pothole, so we won't be able to get into our laneways pretty soon. So is there anything in the plans to rebuild, redo, at least fill in all the potholes through Beaverbrook?
So yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. So yeah, in the immediate, you call 311, give them the location, and they should come over. We have these new machines now that are filling them all in one movement. So they are being more efficient, but they really do need people to call in and let them know the location. So that, Tony, as a first. In terms of like just, when you get roads that are so bad that they need to be repaved, there's a priority list, and, I can find out what the new priority list is and see if there are any streets that you're talking about or that you would think are the worst. But absolutely, the 311 has asked us repeatedly to tell people, please call. You can send an email to the counselor's office here to kathy.curry@ottawa.ca, and we'll send it right on. And I have heard, actually, Tony, from people that when they've sent it to us or through on, they've come quite quickly and filled them. So that for one. But the cost of paving roads, there's a long list of what needs to be done. And, we look at the major roads that we need money for, and, it's not there. And I think the problem is getting so challenging that, this cost has been downloaded to the city that I think the councillors may have to go back to say, we can't manage the cost of roads when the federal government and the provincial government aren't kicking in any money anymore. So I think most councillors are hearing the exact same things, and will probably look forward to putting forward a motion to ask for money again.
Okay, and it doesn't help when the provincial government decides not to charge me for a license plate anymore and gives me money back when that money is supposed to go to those kinds of things. So
I know.
That's another thing to think about in the next election. The second question, Kathy, had to do with the new bylaw or whatever it is for Airbnbs in the community. So I know we're not the only ones that have one next door to us. There are more in the community, but my understanding is that the owner is actually supposed to be living in the house and then is able to rent out portions of the house on a short-term or long-term basis. So the condition that we have now is that the owner of the house is pretending he's living in the house. He's not really. There's 3 or 4 cars parked either on the road or 1 car in the laneway and 2 on the road. And it's a 2-car laneway and a 2-car garage. So they're not using that as a residence. The other thing that makes it even more difficult is that we have a no parking sign in front of our property because the traffic calming is supposed to be coming, but it's not there yet. So we can't park properly on, if I have visitors or family coming to visit, they can't park in front of my house, but these people can park their cars. The owner of the property is parking his construction vehicle or a panel van or whatever that has nothing to do with the residents. And the other thing that's frustrating is every once in a while, not every garbage day, but maybe every second garbage day, one of his pickup trucks shows up, drops off garbage from another residence or from a construction site or whatever it is, and leaves it there. And then the garbage cans, because they're not the people that are occupying the house, they feel it's not their responsibility. So they're up for 2 or 3 days. Now, again, it's just not being community oriented, what's happening next door. And I won't elaborate on the time we had to call him out for having certain people working out of his basement, having visitors coming that would hang out at my house. That wasn't a legal business, we'll say.
So I think there's 2 parts there. So Tony, absolutely send me an email and we'll get bylaw over there. If you have any video at all of that garbage being dropped off.
They haven't been here by today yet, but we can take care of that. We have lots of pictures.
Okay, perfect.
And not
Send
just us, but the guy across the street and the people on the other side. And the complaints have been, and actually Judy was actually one of the people that presented to the council when they were talking about the bylaws for Airbnbs, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Perfect. Send that to me. We'll send bylaw over there, and also potentially, because of your second issue, Jeff Kostuch, our community police officer. Will you send that to us? And we'll follow up with that, because that, you can't have that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to close off. There is a little bit of formalism to this report. So could I have somebody make a motion to accept the president's report?
I'll motion, Tony DeMarinis.
Can I have a seconder?
I'll second, Denny Bork.
Thank you. All right, so Treasurer's report, as I said briefly, and so I'll scoot through some of this stuff, is we've done better than expected. We also put in for a major capital grant for our renovations, which was accepted. So we have a number of years to spend that money, and 50% of the $30,000 that was approved for that particular project is eligible for refund from the city, which goes on an incremental basis, which is great because we don't have a deadline because, as I said before, we're having trouble lining up the contractors to do the work. We also got a donation for $3,000 through Enbridge of all people. I talked to quite a few people to qualify, saying, well, there's strings attached to getting a donation for green projects. And the answer was, no, it's a straight up, here's the money. If you mention us, that's nice. Where you want, some of the community associations. So again, that's going to be going towards some ecology projects that are happening in Beaverbrook and the rest of Canada North. So that money will be spent, and quite possibly we'll use it to pay some students to do some work during this summer or next. So, and again, renovations is our main thing. The problem is one of the general contractors I know quite well in the community has said, he said, Neil, I'm getting business right now where I'm getting a renovation of the whole floor of a house or an entire house. And that's the going piece that's going these days. And, for us to find bits and pieces to do something that's, maybe 10 cents on the dollar of what they make in the same time frame, his choice is pretty easy. So Laura Hogue, who's our community center, is going to be interviewing some additional people. We have found some potential candidates to do the work, so we're on the search for it. And if anybody knows somebody they can highly recommend to do renovations that are very similar to what's in a home, because of course the community center is a wood frame building that was built in 1965. So it's the same materials and the same understanding and skills required, possibly with a few twists. So if anybody's got any recommendations or people you would like to vouch for, we'd like to hear about it. So here is in fine print, and all the reports, including the treasurer's report and et cetera, will be up on the Canada Beaverbrook website after this meeting. So anybody wants to look at this stuff in details. Basically, I can read off what what are the differences. We had budgeted for a total revenue of $51,000 last year. Sorry, we had budgeted actually only for $6,000 of revenue from the community center. And instead, what we ended up with is almost 20,000. So that was a big change, but predicting this time last year as to what we were going to see in terms of revenue, it was who knows, because previous to that, in the latter parts of 2020, well, we were being shut down half the time. So that was the big difference. So as I said, we had a delta. It says 59,000 in red. That's actually positive. That's money we didn't spend in terms of the variance. So our budget for 2022 is to spend about $30,000 on, which is about half our total budget. We have the funds for in terms of doing renovations, which will happen, if we can, while we're still renting the community center out. If not, it will happen during the summer and other times where it's quiet. None of these things are super major, but the whole community center needs some upgrades for accessibility, as said, electronics, lighting, just to spruce it up because it's getting a little ratty after 60 odd years. And put in facilities that people are looking for, such as, large screens for doing presentations and holding meetings and various other activities like that. But generally speaking, we're doing fairly well. The one thing that we have as an advantage over the other community associations, we do have the community center as a revenue stream. Now, we do have expenses in terms of, paying, we pay $20 an hour for community center manager, and, the same thing for our cleaner, which are market rates. So we do have expenses that are not trivial, but we do have that as a revenue source. And actually, we've been banking $10,000 for the last 10 years, about $10,000 a year in terms of additional cash that we can use for projects. A few years ago, we renovated all the corner street signs. That was about $55,000 to $60,000 because we had 59 of those signs. So anything we want to do in the community, they're not any, nothing's cheap anymore. So certainly when we're looking at projects in the community, in the case of the city, there's grants available for those. There are other avenues like the Trillium Foundation. There are other things for other kinds of projects. But nothing's cheap these days, but we are in good shape. And, we've got financial backing. We have a full-time bookkeeper who works on this. And so we've got the accounting, and we also have very good support for accounting from other people in the community, but we need a treasurer anyway. So could I have someone to motion on accepting the treasurer's report, or are there any questions?
I guess everyone's muted, Neil. I'll motion to accept the treasurer's report.
Okay.
All motion seconded, Mary Ann.
Anybody opposed? All right, very good. That's that. So unfortunately, our community center coordinator, Laura, can't be here. She's probably still an X-ray at some local hospital. Very unfortunate. So again, points I've already touched on. We've got the Hepa class filters in there. Essentially, all the COVID restrictions have been lifted. Now, we still recommend that people practice physical distancing, and certainly a lot of the renters, they're generally organizations, have been pretty strict in terms of what their community of users is using. There's a lot of seniors groups, and they're happy that the filters are in, and they're still practicing stuff. So we leave it up to them, and we give it all the facilities available to them in terms of extra cleaning, etc. So we're doing whatever is required to do so, but generally speaking, we're seeing a very strong uptake. We've got, 4 long-term new users of the community center. So, at one point, the city was claiming that nobody was going to use their old community center very shortly because there was the KRC up, KRC South, and there was also the Richcraft Center up north. But as we found that people really like to do stuff in their own community. So we don't see the need for the community center going away anytime soon. Most of our clients are now back full time or practicing it, using the system in the way we were before. Here you can see the kind of usage pattern we're getting. It's busy on weekends. There's a few odd spots here and there, but those will generally fill in as we go. We've got, Kung Fu school, guitar and violin lessons, a new yoga instructor. So there's still a very steady demand of organizations that we're probably the least expensive or least expensive for the size of area we've got. We're sponsors of the Girl Guides and the Scouts. Both of those organizations get to use our facilities for free. This past weekend, we had the first private booking for a birthday party in over 2 years. So that's really largely returning to normal. On the renovation front, we've had a number of professional designers come in and look at it, including flooring, lighting, furnishings, paint, window treatments for light control. Anybody who's been in there on a Sunday summer afternoon about 4 p.m. on the second floor, that sun just comes screaming in, and if you don't have good light control during the day, if anybody's trying to do anything visually in terms of art, painting, or even not face the window and have your eyes scorched out. So window treatments are fairly important in the community center. We're going to renovate the cloakroom and also have better distribution of facilities for boots, particularly in winter, and racks on both floors. And updates, particularly from an accessibility standpoint, to the staircase, the door handles, light switches, and the washrooms on our second floor. The washroom on the first floor main room is already fully wheelchair accessible. So what we've had a good discussion with the accessibility expert, because there are some things that you can't do to the building without absolutely massive renovations, but there's a surprising number of things we can do to improve it with the expertise and from the accessibility audit company Access Pros, who, interestingly enough, all of the people in their team have some form of disability or another. So nothing better than getting it from people who have to live with that day to day. So that's very positive, and it was well worth the investment. As I said, we've got the major capital grant, and we're working to find a contractor. Now, if anybody's interested in this in detail, just like this presentation and the materials from this AGM, last year's is there. So there is a very detailed set of documentation of what the plans are for the community center. Those really have not changed. We're really just trying to implement the details at this point. So I encourage you to have a look and also to comment on that. And at this point, any questions on that? Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Mccauley and Diane to talk about Green Beaver.
Thanks, Neil. My name is Robert Mccauley. I've been a director on the board for, I think, 6 or 7 years. And it's been my pleasure to work with some very talented and dedicated, community-minded people on the board of directors, and also to enjoy the strong support from the counselors that we've had, going back to Marianne and Jenna and now Kathy. Incredible support for doing what is the best for the Beaverbrook community. So I'll talk now about the Neighborhoods in Beaverbrook project, which has been around since 2017. It's one of the KBCA's ongoing projects, and it's the goal of the Neighborhoods project is to foster stewardship stewardship of the urban forest and promote community interest in forest renewal. And what happens is volunteers are trained to identify the various species of trees and assess the health of those trees. It's truly a community science project where lay people get to collect data that's of interest to the larger community. And I'll go into a bit more detail about what happened last year and what we've got planned for 2022. But a few other programs that we are hoping to work on or help the city with. One was mentioned by Kathy, the Pathway Renewal Project, which is the city had planned to do last year and is, I guess, going ahead this year. As you know, the pathways throughout Beaverbrook are a key network of transport and recreation for kids and adults of all ages. The second one is the Spongy Moth, aka the Gypsy Moth project. We had some instances of gypsy moths last year. So the city is helping to try to address it by distributing burlap so that community members can help to wrap burlap around some of the park trees and help to, the way it works is the moths, when they're in the caterpillar stage, crawl up and down the trees. So you trap them in burlap and then remove them. It's a fairly labor intensive undertaking, but short in period of time. We've done some on some of the neighborwoods trees here in various people's yards. The city is hoping that the community will step up and look after the sort of the main trees in some of the parks. So Beaverbrook's got about 20 parks, lots of potential for people to help with that. Invasive species removal in parks is another one that has been raised by some of the environmental groups in the city, to have the city help support citizens removing dog strangling vine and some of the other pesky invasive species in the parks. This would require some guidance from the city, some training perhaps, and maybe some oversight. But I think we've got some willing people that would like to pull out the odd weed here and there just to protect the park forest, mini forests. There's a new tree bylaw that's been launched in the past couple of years to restrict the removal of some of the larger trees by, O'Neill, you could forward the slides if you want. Sorry, I didn't mention that. If you can do it for me. There we go. Yeah, the tree bylaw to discourage the removal of larger trees, but it currently only is applicable within the downtown core. It doesn't cover off the suburbs, so that needs to be addressed. And I think we as a community could add some support to make that happen. And Neil mentioned the eco tour. We're through a partnership with the Ottawa Biosphere Eco City. The plan is to put a tour together, or a series of tours, perhaps self-driven, self-guided, about the ecological significance of one of the resources that we have in Canada North. It's not in Beaverbrook, but it's the South March Highlands, which is a real treasure. It's a large acreage that the city owns, and it's being used for a variety of functions now. But there really needs to be some thought put into how can we oversee with a long-term view this important resource and do it with sustainability in mind. A couple of other things that as a community we've done in the past or would like to do is do a few more information sessions along the lines of ones we've done in the past. Using the community center, we've hosted a few different evening sessions, but they could be turned into, with some planning, into webinars by recording them and then making them available. One we did was called Planting the Right Tree in the Right Place. We did another one on living with wildlife. So these kinds of things could be quite helpful if we had a bit more skills in terms of capturing videos and distributing them. Okay, so this is what we did last year. Because of COVID, we limited our tree inventory to the parks, the larger parks. So we got quite a bit of inventory done. We did between 500 and 600 trees. We had a small team. We improved our method of capturing data and doing some analysis by implementing a geographical information system tool that allowed the use of smartphones to capture the data instead of a clipboard. So that's something we'll continue to develop this year. We also helped Old Ottawa South and Centrepoint, two separate community associations, launch their tree inventory projects. So that was where Diane and I went and helped support a teaching effort over a couple of weekends. And those two groups will continue this year. So there's some organic growth now with the Neighborhoods Initiative, which is it's a systematic process that requires some training. Next slide, Neil. So this year we're going to restart our door-to-door tree inventory, which we had begun in 2017, and start with delivery of a training course June 4th and 5th, which is an in-depth hands-on course teaching people with or without any previous knowledge on how to identify the various species of trees. We've identified about 93 in our neighborhood so far. And then assessing the health of those trees, and the information that is gathered is shared with the homeowner, and but also contributes to an aggregate assessment of what's our forest looking like in terms of diversity of species, diversity of health, age, all those kinds of things. We have been, over the past few years, and we'll do again, partner with Carleton University's, some of the senior, like third and fourth year students of the environmental science faculty, to research topics of interest to us and them on, it's usually been about trees so far, but tree pests and diseases, for example, and how do you measure the tree canopy and assess, is that, are you striving towards the optimal species mix for this climate? And how do you plan for climate change and accommodating new species in a warmer climate? And one of the last points here is we continue to partner with environmental groups such as the Community Association for Environmental Sustainability, which Neil mentioned earlier is CAFES. And they cover a wide range of environmental initiatives across Ottawa, including climate change related projects or educational movements that we could be a lot more involved in than we have been if we had more volunteers. So I think that brings us nicely to the next topic, which Diane is going to cover, which is the recently completed community survey of residents. Well, this map shows the areas that we have already inventoried with the trees. We've got about 2,000 homes in Beaverbrook, and we've done about 2,600 trees. It looks like, I don't know, we're maybe a fifth of the way there.
Yeah.
So it's a long-term project, and then we have to kind of revisit even some of the stuff we've already done. As you probably know, trees tend to reach maturity or disappear for various reasons, so we need to upgrade our inventory. And we can provide more information on the results of both the survey and the tree inventory on the website, should you be interested. Over to you, Diane.
Are there any questions for Rob before we continue, or can I just jump in? Okay, resounding silence, perfect. So in March we launched via mailers that were distributed to all of the homes here in the Beaverbrook community. We invited residents to participate in a brief survey. Some of the objectives here were to really reconnect with our community, introduce them to the KBCA activities, those activities that we organize and sponsor, and also really a bit of a feeler out there for, are there people who are in the community that would want to volunteer on community projects to make it better for everyone? So the results were very satisfactory. Out of the 1,935 mailers that we sent out, we had 236 responses, which is approximately 12% of the households responded. It's pretty good for an initial start. we asked people if we could add them to our distribution list, email distribution list, and we did increase our reach by more than 20%. And the other thing which was surprising is that nearly 50% of the respondents said they were willing to volunteer. So that's very encouraging, because that means that we've got some potential out there to really start improving the community and working on things that are of interest to people. Preliminary data analysis and charts have been posted or will be posted on the KBCA website. Now, these are preliminary. There was also a lot of verbatim responses. Those will take a little bit more time to extract all the themes and to group them and present them in meaningful ways. So stay tuned. There will be charts there and additional information coming soon. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Neil introduced some of these things. We do have, like, what are the opportunities if you do feel like volunteering? Well, definitely, we're always looking for new board members. There's definitely openings right now for directors and treasurer. We could use the website developer, or the website could use some enhancement. And we're also looking for some team leaders for some of the projects. Now, some of the possible projects that have, and these are coming out of some of the themes and the responses in the areas that were of top of mind for the respondents to the resident survey, are things like park and pathway enhancements. So people are talking about maybe putting in more gardens, maybe adding some benches. So these things would be things we would have to work with the city in order to do that. The community cleanup is something that happens every year. I know the city has launched it, but usually in the past, we've tried to organize it such that we make sure that all the different areas, like not everybody goes and cleans the one area, that people spread out and all the areas are cleaned up. So that's something to get involved in. There's always, we're always looking for additional people for advocacy, reviewing the plans and writing letters, the development plans, the city planning, transportation plan, name it. We're always looking for people to get involved there. Some of the things that we'd also like to look at are some social and maybe youth activities. And I think street barbecues were also mentioned earlier by Neil, or cluster barbecues. So that's another area that we could use people to start organizing that. And then really Beaverbrook, one of the things that I've perhaps forgot to mention is, but it's been alluded to before, and it was nice to see that a lot of the people who responded, one of the questions we asked them is, when did you move into Beaverbrook? And there was about a third of the respondents who were quite new. They'd been in the neighborhood for 7 years or less. And that's good, because these are the people who are new to their environment. Maybe they're not very familiar with the heritage and stories of Beaverbrook. So there's an area that maybe we could help to organize some of that, and maybe even use some of the resources from the library and actually make that real and accessible to more people, so that they get a better sense of what are we about, and where have you been and where do we want to go.
I just want to jump in here. I don't want to talk over you guys or anything, but at the Beaverbrook Library, we actually have something called the Canada Room, something special to our library. And if you guys ever wanted to, give us some stuff or collaborate on a project, we'd be absolutely happy to do something like that with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We'll take you up on it.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, a few years ago, a bunch of people much more knowledgeable than I am put together a heritage walk, which is part of the Heritage Ottawa Society. They do a whole series of walking tours across the city, and we were at it about 5 or 6 years ago. I get the joyous of doing that tour. I've been called out to do that in some cases 3 times during the spring, summer, and fall. It's very popular. We've had quite a few organizations who are in town for things like heritage tours and heritage conferences come out. So if there's a large interest for that, we can certainly do it. It's about a 90-minute walk through a chunk of it, and there's a lot of history and a lot of interesting things that I certainly didn't know, and I've been here 10 years when I started getting involved in that. So if
And Neil, as you know, I'm working on a book about Canada, which I hope to have out by this fall, if I'm lucky. It's taken a long time because I have to do a lot of background checks and things. But the library will be getting, by the way, a lot more material for the Canada room that I am keeping with me until I finish the book, but then I'll have to have a place to put it. I have even more that I'm going to put in the Ottawa archives so that people will be able to find things in the future if they want to dig into more detail. Because the biggest problem I have is there's too much. And I found I found all the meetings from the planning committee when we started in 1970 when Taran left. In 70 and 74, we have all their minutes, and we are meeting every 2 weeks. And that was a community that was entirely made up of volunteers. So it's about how volunteers did it. So I think you don't need volunteers anymore. You always need volunteers, and they do. They are what makes a community. There's no question about that.
Thank you, Marianne. So the next step is, I would say, stay tuned, watch for emails announcing meetings around these topics and looking for people to join that meeting, really with the point of trying to identify some projects and really getting people to step up and maybe lead some of these initiatives. So with that, that's it. Back to you, Neil.
Okay, thank you. So, it's interesting that the kind of response we got from the online survey with a combination of posting signs out like we have been doing for announcing meetings. It's it's a lot easier to do, and we're getting very good response. So thank you for all those people who did respond. All input is gratefully received, and it's very good to see that we're getting a lot of people who are interested in volunteering, and we're going to certainly look at whatever we can do to assist people in getting up to speed and being able to work with people who've been doing this for a while. So we're coming to sort of like the end of the meeting, and now one thing I do want to mention, because people have been asking about it, and that's the cleanup. This cleaning up the Capitol is a springtime activity that happens every year, and it's something that we've certainly encouraged everybody to get out and do their piece, because there's lots of areas in Beaverbrook that are not beside people's homes that we also need to be cleaned up. Certainly areas like both sides of Beaverbrook Road, and in some cases down Taran Road, and some of the parks in and around the high school. Various woods we have around here are all going to need work. We have generally delayed that until the first or second week in May. And the primary reason for that is as the ground freezes with so much of the green space and, natural forest floors, if you go out while everything's still melting and we're getting heavy rain, you can do a lot of damage. In fact, there was a call that was put out a couple of weeks ago up in the South March Highlands around some of the cycling trails for people to avoid cycling or walking through there, because you're essentially walking on something that's still frozen farther down, so you're grinding the roots that can't take it, and suddenly you've got permanent damage to a lot of the foliage. So we'll be putting out a call for that, and we have lots of supplies and materials which we're happy to drop off. And we also usually work with our counselor to get a special pickup day for any and drop off points for where to drop the bags full of garbage to do pick up. And we also have one-shot gloves, all that kind of stuff. So we have lots of supplies, and we'd be happy to give you a map for you to sign up to clean various areas. So I'd just like to cover that last point off before we move on to looking at our proposed slate of officers. This slide is getting to be a little old. It's the same people, I think, for the last 5 years. We'd like to see some new people in. And the people on here should be known to all of you. Myself, Rob Mccauley, David Brown, Tom Lawson, Noel McGinney, and Kevin McCarthy are cluster directors. In other words, they look after different areas of our community. We would like to have we're looking for a technical director. We very much need a treasurer. We don't need somebody to do the books. We have the books being done. What we need is somebody who's got financial expertise who could advise us in terms of investment and how to use our funds. So it's strictly an advisory role, but we do need somebody with a financial background to sit on the board. Secretary, we need somebody to capture the minutes, which is something that's vital, that somebody's a recorder, and a communications director. So getting the word out through social media is a vital part of that. We're also looking potentially at part-time paid positions. If anybody's got somebody who has got web expertise, who is looking to earn some funds on the side, we have the funds. What we don't have is the time and the people to do that. So that's the proposed slate. Is there anybody else, any additional nominations or volunteers from the floor? And anybody want to volunteer or volunteer somebody, feel free to do so in the chat or raise your hand and electronically, and please step forward. All right, so the usual high volume of volunteers, as we've come to expect, but we have your emails, so we know how to find you. If you volunteered, we'll be in touch, and we will have some programs out for that. So, actually, we have a volunteer. Very good. Kevin, I will note your name. If you could send me an email at info@canadabeaverbrook.ca. It's info@canadabeaverbrook.ca. I'll put that in the chat. If you just want to send me a note here, we'll see, we've got positions to fill. I'm sure we can find some role for you to fill at the board of director. Always welcome to have people come on board. So please do so. I'd like to ask for somebody to motion to accept the slate as it stands, plus Kevin Haley. Tony, you're going to do triple duty tonight?
Denny Bork, I'll move.
Okay, I'll second Dennis's motion.
All right, and with that, I'm just going to type that note because I'm acting as secretary again tonight. Anybody opposed? No volunteers to take flag. That's a great sign. So with that, I thank you very much. Any last comments, questions, observations before we close it off for the evening?
Neil, I'd just like to say one thing, to say a thank you from everybody here to you for not just running this meeting, but for all the work you've been doing for the community over the years, because I think Beaverbrook would be so much poorer off if you hadn't stepped in to take on the role that you've done, particularly in the planning and development areas, which have been really helped everybody. So big round of applause for Neil.
All right. Thank you. The door's always open, info@beaverbrook.ca. And like I said, we'll be getting more information out, and I'll also be sending an email out a little later this week with all the materials for you to have a look. Again, thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.